Good evening and good to have you with us on the 9 p.m. edition of the Urban Debate. Viewers, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitaraman announced about 12 measures as what is being labelled as the recent set of stimulus under Atmanirbhar Bharat 3.0. Now, this is aimed at boosting employment, boosting credit opportunities for businesses and companies to expand further and grow and pay their employees. This is also intended to boost manufacturing and a lot more. Let me in fact first take you through the highlights, the big pointers, the 12 key announcements. The first one, and we'll go into the detail of this in just a bit, are the incentives, the PF incentives that the government has announced for companies to hire new employees. And all of this also in a bit for formalization of jobs and our businesses. There is also a series of steps, support that's been announced for 26 of our stressed sectors, including sectors that we've often talked about here on Mirror Now that need government's dire attention. There are production-linked incentives for the manufacturing sector, additional 18,000 crore for the urban housing scheme, support for construction and infrastructure, and in fact there repeatedly, not just Nirmala Sitaraman but even Sanjeev Sanyal in an interview to us has said that the government is committed in giving whatever support is required to the infrastructure segment. It's 6,000 crore additional investment or additional allocation into the National Investment in Infra Fund. Now here is the interesting one, and again I will give you the details of this. Income tax relief for home buyers, especially those who may be looking to buy homes up to the value of 2 crore rupees. Also some relief for developers, fertilizer subsidy that's been announced for farmers, additional fund allocation of about 10,000 crore under the Garib Kalyan Rozgar Yojana, much needed because the government's already running out of the funds that they had allocated and the scheme has been extended. Measures to also boost exports. All of this has been announced today, including additional allocation for vaccine and R&D. Now, let's talk about two specifics for you, directly what may impact people. And that's the employment scheme and a formal boost to the formal employment sector that the government has done. Now, who benefits from this scheme? Any new employee who gets employment in an EPFO registered firm, which is why I'm saying formal employment. And this employee has a monthly salary of less than 15,000 rupees. Also, those with salary less than 15,000 who may have lost their jobs between March and September and have now been employed again, they will also get these incentives and benefits. Now, what is it that the government has announced as support? Well, what they've essentially said under the Atmanirbhar Bharat Rozgar Yojana is that companies who hire these people, there the government will bear the cost. So either you hire people who so far did not have a PF account or an EPF number and you bring them onto the formal side, you get incentives for that. Or if you hire somebody who's lost their job between March and September, you get the benefit of that. What's the benefit? The government will bear 24% of the PF burden for 2 years with firms which have less than 1,000 employees. The government will bear 12% of the PF burden for 2 years for firms who have employees more than 1,000. And the government says all of these steps are likely to benefit about 65% of the formal workforce because of this scheme. The other one, if you are a home buyer, apart from the steps that have already been announced in the recent past, there is an income tax relief. Now, usually government charges you an income tax on the difference between the cost of your home and the circle rate. And if that the differential is more than 10%, then the government charges you an income tax on that. That threshold has now been increased from 10% to 20%. So that is the relief which is coming in for home buyers. Of course, that's only for properties that cost less than 2 crore. Otherwise, if you can afford to buy properties beyond that, you might as well pay a little bit more tax on it. So, is this enough? What will be the impact of this? Can we really expect jobs to be created because of these incentives? Well, the Congress party believes no. Former Finance Minister Chidambaram came out and said that there is nothing so far in all of these three stimulus packages that have been announced that actually help in job creation. These are some of the questions that I have for our experts who join us this evening. So let's say good evening to Professor Santosh Mehrotra, Senior Economist who joins us this evening. Professor Aman Agarwal, Director and Professor of at the Indian Institute of Finance with us this evening. Also Tamal Bandyopadhyay, Author and Consulting Editor to Business Standard. MS Unikrishnan, Chairman for CII Committee on Industrial Relations, also with us. Sunil Alag, Business and Brand Consultant. Thank you to all of you for joining us. Let me actually begin with Professor Mehrotra. Professor Mehrotra, job incentive scheme that has been announced, where the government says, you know, we will bear some of the PF burden for the companies. Is that going to help in any way?
It might. It might help in the formalization of erstwhile informal workers, meaning might be contract workers, who might be brought, as you rightly pointed out, actually, you very astutely pointed that out yourself. Well, whether it will lead to new workers being hired, we'll have to wait to see. I mean, first the demand in the economy has to revive, and there seems to be precious little evidence that the demand is reviving, because had it been, other than what is normal, what you would normally expect after the lockdown has ended, you expect obviously some recovery. That's why the contraction in this quarter is expected to be less than the 24% happened in the previous quarter. There's nothing that one can sense even in the RBI's paper, which came out this morning, which suggests that they are confident that the third quarter will show positive results. So in other words, we still wait to see. And there's precious little in this package, I should tell you, that's going to generate many jobs. And it's not going to lead to a fiscal stimulus. It's not a fiscal stimulus. It's barely 1 lakh crores of actual expenditure might happen this year, because the whole package is worth 2.65 lakh crores, which is going to be spent over a large number of years. Because please understand that 2 of the 12 schemes announced today account for 2.1 lakh crores of the 2.65 lakh crores. 1.45 is on the 12 industries which are getting the performance-linked incentive, and then an additional 65,000 crores for fertilizer subsidy, which could be spent this year, which may not be spent this year. And obviously the 1.45 lakh crore in 12 sectors is going to take years to spend, inevitably, because work will start now. So let's be realistic and honest about this. That this is unfortunately, again, too little too late, because we should have had a solid fiscal stimulus package 6 months ago. And don't give me the argument that, oh, we couldn't have done it because the economy was in lockdown. If anyone who's worked for government should know the following, that you decide today, the cabinet approves, and then it goes into the procedures of releasing the money. Before the money gets out into the economy, it takes about 3 to 4 months. Had you decided on a similar package in May, you might have been pushing this money out in July. So unlock was already well on its way then.
Let me also get in Aman Agarwal before I go to our other panelists. Aman Agarwal, quick question first again on jobs, because we've seen that many experts have already said this is not going to help in job creation in any way. Unemployment and job creation is still one of our biggest concerns. Your view on what this stimulus package really does?
No, I think the stimulus package, in fact, would certainly kind of create not only new jobs where the companies have not been hiring, but will also create people who have not been in the formal sector get formalized also. Because with the EPFO framework, if these mostly are for the MSME segment, which they're looking at, because the employee base which they talked about is small, it's not large, very large organizations. So when you're looking at those kind of set of organizations, you're actually telling them to formalize their own setups and make it more formal and induce people. And the kind of benefits which are being given are important, because these organizations do not have the kind of liquidity. That is 24% what they're bearing, 12% of both the employee and 12% of the employer is what they're bearing. So we'll certainly incentivize large number of organizations. And as has been quoted by the finance minister herself, that the figures being quoted by Moody's for the current year have improved as against what it was projected before, and also for the year 2022 has improved in terms of the growth projections. And when we look at different segments of the markets, they are offshoots and growth factors which are being visible. So there is that momentum which is getting visible now in terms of the growth component coming in and the hiring taking place. And different states, apart from what she has said, different states are also taking this initiative of the Rozgar Yojana. Even there's a contribution in terms of the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. So there are, I think, these are small steps which will make a major impact in terms of the total impetus which we are going to see in the next. As Santosh also said, it takes about a month and a half, 2 months to go about feeling these facts. But it is no one could have estimated in the past as to what could happen and what could not happen. So this kind of step-by behavior is more calculated and better approach in terms of inducing a more structured job structures in the economy.
Okay, let me go across to Mr. M.S. Unnikrishnan. Mr. Unnikrishnan, repeatedly the conversation we've had since the first step of stimulus measures or stimulus package, or let's just call it an economic relief package till now, is that a lot of the government steps are meant to enable and empower businesses to borrow more rather than helping, giving money directly in their hands or money in the hands of people. And at the end of the day, you're just pushing people and companies to just borrow more and more and get buried under debt. In that sense, this doesn't seem to be any different. But is it working on ground? Are these government's policies helping the industry?
Well, it is working to the advantage of the Indians, I would say that. Because we can have opinions given that stimulus package is announced, the job should happen day after tomorrow. It just doesn't happen that way. I would say it's a very well thought about stimulus package. And they've done it after discussing with the industry, with the labor union and multiple stakeholders. And if you have to see the distribution of that, of the 2.65 lakh crores of rupees, approximately 1.46 lakh crore is for various sectors of industries. And which are those specifically given in the industrial sector is something which we need to look at it. In my opinion, these are the ones where an import substitution is a necessity because of the trade deficit that we are facing with a specific country. If you item by item go, auto components is approximately 1/3 of the entire stimulus package. And chemicals, solar cells, these all can have an immediate impact in terms of investment coming into the country. And at least 40,000 crores is already announced by the government as a viability gap funding for electronics industry. So I would look at it positively, and I'm not expecting that jobs are going to get created day after tomorrow. Yeah, again in the package, what they mentioned about support to the industry, those who are employing up to 1,000 people, we will pay not only the employees' contribution, so the company's contribution, even the employees' contribution of 12%. So totally 24% of the total salary of the employee, the government is going to be subsidizing for 2 years. So this is a first of a kind of a move. I mean, it's not happened in the country earlier. And even for companies already employing more than 1,000 people, they are willing to pay the employer's contribution of 10%.
Yeah, so, but does it really become a deciding factor for hiring, Mr. Unnikrishnan? Is it really a factor when it comes to hiring?
Nobody hires a human being as a worker or a manager, white collar or blue collar, just because there is a stimulus package available. It is only when the demand picks up and the capacity which is in existence get utilized. If I as a CEO were to be seeing that my capacity utilization at least 80-85%, and a new project for which I'm going to be hiring people are going to come into being 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line, I'll start committing my investment and I'll start hiring people. That hiring, as Santosh mentioned about, would happen across 1 year, 2 years, even 3 years. For example, a solar plant will take maybe only 6 months to come into being, a maximum 1 year, so I can start hiring. However, if it will be steel, special steel industry, if I start buying land today, my factory will be ready only so maybe 36 months down the line. So why would I hire somebody today? I will start hiring only 24 months down the line. But at least there is a hope available where the people are going to be coming to the employment market and the unemployment prevailing will progressively come down. So I would recommend that this is a kind of thing that we needed, because normally packages are 5,000 crore 10,000 crore. Now India is taking gutsy decision. Each package is equivalent to maybe 10 to 15% of the GDP. That's what we needed to do. So I appreciate that way. Not being a partisan supporting anybody. I wish, and I agree with you again what Santosh mentioned about, if it's done earlier, it could have been better. But why worry about the past? Let's look forward to the future.
Well, one thing is for sure, because Professor Mehrotra and I have had many conversations, and we've always said that a lot more is needed, a lot more is needed. The time is now, and I think for the last 2-3 months we may have said it multiple times, but good that something's come along. I also want to just quickly highlight a part of the report card that Finance Minister presented, of the schemes that have already been announced and to what extent the government says they've actually worked. So, One Nation, One Ration Card, although it wasn't really a very new scheme when it was mentioned in the first stimulus package, because the government had already announced it and had begun plans to implement it. But now the government says 28 states and UTs have been brought under the National Portability Scheme. The scheme is already covering about 68.6 crore beneficiaries, which means that you can travel and be in one state while you belong to the other, while you're registered somewhere else, and your ration card will still work. The government also then gave us an update on the PM Street Vendor Scheme, where they said about 26.6 lakh loan applications had been received. And about 1,373 crore worth of loans had already been sanctioned. Now, this, of course, is specifically for those street vendors and to help them revive their own business and get some government support or credit support rather. They also said that the work on the portal for migrant workers has commenced. As far as liquidity scheme for housing finance companies, 7,200 crore rupees has already been dispersed. The liquidity injection, which is more money being given in the hands of the DISCOMs, the power distribution companies, loans of about 118,000 crore to 17 states and union territories were applied for. A lot of this has already been dispersed. And then again, the schemes under Atmanirbhar 2.0, they've given us details of how the LTC vouchers and advances on the SBI Utsav cards have actually worked. Now, that is actually to do more with giving money in the hands of people. So, Sunil Allah, good evening to you. Your sense of what has been announced now, the last time we spoke a while ago though, you weren't too happy with the measures being announced. Has that view now changed?
Look, what the Prime Minister has announced that, look, you have to take care of the poor, you have to take care of agriculturalists first. And he's done a terrific job on that. And at the same time, look, I've been saying it for the last 9 months or 10 months. There are 300 million middle class people and he's done nothing for them. Look, in this particular system, demand creation is the oil in the engine. And today, if you look at where the demand has gone up, it's because of the festival, it's because of the massive discounts which are being offered by all the companies. Now, how to sustain this demand will be the question in the fourth quarter. The third quarter is going to be great. There's no question about it. In the fourth quarter, I always say there's a balance between supply side and a balance between demand side. They're again going on the supply side where they're giving a lot of loans, and who will buy the houses if they don't have the money? So ultimately, at the end of the day, if you ask me, look, my only suggestion to the government will be that, look, they've got to bring about a certain balance. None of the steps are going to happen today. As a previous economist has said, this is going to take 2 years, 1 year, 2 years. Great moves. All for the poor, all for agriculture, all for everything. They're great moves. But for industry, if you are giving them to employ people, why will they employ people unless the demand goes up? So they've done nothing for demand generation by the 300 million who are having an inflation going up, their cost of living is going up, and nothing is being given to them to generate the cycle of demand. And that is very, very critical according to me, which is being ignored because they think the supply side will trickle down. Those who are going to build the houses, fine. You've given them the money, they'll build the houses. Who will buy them? So you're just postponing that all of them will not be able to return the loans that they are taking. And maybe in another 2 years or 1 year, you'll have to write off all these loans. So ultimately, at the end of the day, I think it's a terrific job. They are giving money because they're looking at the economy, maybe in 1 to 2 years, and they're attracting investment. All the in companies like in America who are giving up China, the Apple and everybody else, they'll get the benefit. So you're attracting FDI with this, which is great. You are doing a great job on that. You're doing a great job on exports, because that's the two areas which are very important. But one area which is being ignored is creation of demand in India, the 300 million middle income and lower middle income. I'm not talking about the upper income, because for them, it doesn't make a damn difference on what you do, because they have the money and they're going to spend money according to what they want. But it's the middle income group and the lower middle income group that has to be sustained to generate demand. And my only suggestion would be that, look, they need to balance that, and that's not being balanced. They're still continuing heavily on the supply side. They're giving lots of benefits to the industry. And as somebody pointed out, maybe 2 years later, you'll get the benefit. But right now, why will I employ even 5 people? Why will I employ even 100 people unless the demand goes up? And that's the question, because you're giving me money, but I'm not going to be utilizing it. And a lot of companies have now cut costs. In the last 11 months, they've done with less people, they are doing more. So they are not going to start re-employing. I mean, that's what I think, but who knows? Maybe I'm wrong.
I hope you are, Mr. Sunil Alak, but I do know what you're talking about. And once somebody discovers a more efficient way of using lesser people to get the same work done, they hardly ever go back to hiring more people. And I think that, unfortunately, is going to be a larger impact in terms of, number of people who are getting employed if companies find other ways and easier ways to work with lesser people. Yes.
One question I will say there, the government is spending on infrastructure, sure. They're going to generate employment, and I've always said government must spend on infrastructure and government must get foreign companies to come in. And so on that part, they're doing a tremendous job. But unless the domestic demand goes up, how do you sustain these 3 months? Please, they've got to understand these 3 months people are spending because of pent-up demand. They're spending because of festivities. They're spending because there are 50% discounts being offered by Amazon, Flipkart. Everybody is coming and buying. You have to sustain this demand in the fourth quarter. And that very little has been done.
Mr. Tamal Bandyopadhyay, good evening to you. Let me pick up from, what Sunil Alak said, that there is no point in coming out with more schemes and announcements to enable businesses to borrow more, invest more, until people are buying more. And on the buying more side, not much is happening. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, broadly, yes, I think any sensible person would agree with that. Let me give you a slightly different perspective, meaning I don't want to repeat what Mr. Alak said, but yes, I'm sync with him. There's nothing much here to create demand. Now, I'm not very good at math, but I was just wondering, where does this 2.65, is it, how much stimulus actually? It's about 1 trillion. Okay, so it's 2.65. You can show it because most of it is the Atmanirbhar manufacturing production link incentive, which is 1.46 trillion, close to. Now, this 1.46 trillion, you don't get the benefit right now. It's a fantastic move. It's a very constructive move. It's a reform move, and we will get the benefit. But we need to wait for a few years. So if that out, then you are left with 1.2 trillion for today's fiscal. But there also you will see that it's actually not that. It's roughly about 1 trillion, 0.5% of GDP. So with this today's the third tranche of this package, one in May, one in October, and one today, it's roughly about 2.3% of GDP, the so-called fiscal stimulus we are talking about, which is far, far less than most of the other countries. I'm not going to compare, neither I am saying that we must need to spend, we must need to have that kind of stimulus between 5 and 10% of that. But the problem where
Mr. Bandyopadhyay, if I may just come in here, because sorry, there was a bit of an audio glitch that we had. The government says that this, I mean, technically they're saying that so far what they've announced is 15% of the GDP as the stimulus. Your own calculation puts it where?
About 2.3%.
About
2.3% fiscal stimulus, all of GDP over the three, including the 3 phases. And this particular phase, if you see, the large part of money is actually for fertilizer subsidy. 65,000 crore for fertilizer subsidy. Now, I'm just wondering, is it sort of like the overdues to the companies and all, the government needs to clean up the overdues? That's why the 65,000 numbers come up? Or will it be a fresh, subsidy? I'm not very sure about that. So overall, if you see the entire contour of the package today and even the previous, it's not fiscal stimulus, it's more on the dole and subsidy kind of stuff. So how would that create demand? That's the point. There are various elements which will over a period, and they're all welcome things, which will over a period of time will get the benefit. But at this point of time, if you think that this particular thing is it 2.65 trillion and lots of money, people will get the money, so on and so forth. That's not the case. That's not the case, and that has never been the case. And the other point I was drawing attention to is this: on the one hand, we are seeing that this kind of money, it's much less than what has been projected in terms of stimulus coming in, but the budgetary spending is not happening. If you see the capex which has been outlined in the budget, it's not happening there. And don't expect that to happen in fourth quarter, because typically on fourth quarters, government historically doesn't spend much, because the fiscal deficit and other issues, they crop up, they become very cautious. So if you tell me that no, the government has not been spending so much till now, but we'll see the burst of spending in the fourth quarter, this is unlikely to happen. So my very naive question is this: as I said, I'm not an expert. Is it like we are shifting the numbers from what to a large extent was made the budgetary allocations? This is not happening, and now you are taking this money, spending this money through this way. So overall, there is nothing much additional thing.
So correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Bandyopadhyay, but from my understanding, the question that you are asking, and maybe any of our panelists can take it, is what was announced in the budget isn't getting done or implemented.
Yes.
Newer budgets, mini budgets are being announced one after the other instead. Mr. Unnikrishnan, do you want to comment?
Yeah, certainly I wanted to answer that, because we need to be practical, realistic. When we made the budget, we expected our average collection of GST to be 1.2 lakh crore per month. And come March, before the new year arriving, we had to get into a lockdown condition. And our GST collection has fallen to an all-time low of 32,000 crores in the month of April. And even the last month, after maybe 7 months, we have touched maybe a lakh crore. Which government can then spend money? See, please remember, we are not a surplus cash country. We are, I'm sorry to say that way, hand to mouth, government is the single largest borrower. There is no money. And in fact, at the time of July end, both the state governments and the central government have bereft of money to pay salary to government employees. That's the situation that your country was in. And that's the time when we started having at least the second larger tranche of the stimulus package being announced. When I said that this is a brave move, it's because in hindsight, everybody can say that we should have done it earlier. When the world was talking about when will the vaccine happen, is it going to be the doomsday? Is it going to be equivalent to a 3-year or 10-year of equivalent of that, like what happened 100 years back in the Spanish plague? Is same discussion happened in similar kind of forums than me, say 8 months back. Today, we have seen a lakh of crore getting collected right now. Government is bold enough to go ahead with that one. And we do know that things are going to be picking up across the globe, even though we may end up only with maybe a 10% drop in the GDP in the current year.
Mr. Unnikrishnan, don't call it only. I know we've reached minus 24 as a number, but please don't call our GDP contraction only 10% as only. It's still a horrifying number to stare at and will have longer term repercussions. You and I both know that. Yeah. Professor Mehrotra, though, wants to respond to this. Professor Mehrotra.
Yeah. With all due respect to Unni, who's a very dear friend of mine, I want to say the following. It does matter when and how much is the size of the fiscal stimulus. When is matters because your economy contracted very severely and has continued to contract. I just want to tell you what comparatively our economy is performing. All the world has suffered from COVID. the world GDP is going to contract by 4.4. What are we going to contract by? 10.1 according to the IMF. These are all IMF numbers. US going to contract by 4.3. We are 10.3. Japan by 4.3. We are 10.3. None of the BRICS economies is contracting by anywhere close to what we are contracting by. And let's remind ourselves that not one of the BRICS economies, not one of the advanced economies have 200 million people who live below the poverty line. Let us remind ourselves that millions have lost jobs in our country. Poverty is increasing by the day. So what the size of the stimulus is and when you put it in position is absolutely critical to keeping people above the poverty line, point one. And it's critical to generate demand so that down the road, then MSMEs can revive because there is demand for their products, and even the large enterprises can revive. Unfortunately, because of the delays that we have put in place, because of the small size of the fiscal stimulus, as Tamal was rightly pointing out, we are in a situation where we are likely to not get anywhere close to the 1920 GDP level in 21-22. And in the best case scenario, in an optimistic scenario, we might get to 1920 GDP level by 22-23. Are you seriously saying we've not lost 3 years in the lives of our young? I have students who are jobless and are not getting jobs. So don't tell me that it doesn't matter what the size of the fiscal stimulus is. Don't tell me a 6-month delay does not matter. It matters to the lives of human beings.
Okay, I know Unikrishnan wants to respond and I will come to you, but I want to very quickly go to Sunil Alag. For one comment, Mr. Sunil Alag, the debate also always boils down to whether the government should be so concerned about the fiscal deficit. Fair enough, they don't have the money. Fair enough, there have not been tax collections. Can they not borrow more and spend more right now?
See, the fiscal deficit, I've always said, should be put into the background because at today, if you take it's not cast in stone. Next year, you can bring the fiscal deficit down and you can bring it down in the following years. So this year, let the fiscal deficit go because ultimately at the end of the day, I'm not saying that you have a 20% or a 30% fiscal deficit, but the old targets are ridiculous because you have to follow the Keynesian system of economics. I'm just an economics student and everybody around me are professors. But all I can say is that, look, they've said in a developing economy, even if your inflation is 7%, it shows you are growing. And therefore, ultimately, at the end of the day, we are comparing our fiscal deficit to the world. America has survived a fiscal deficit because it's a very strong economy. We are not saying that the fiscal deficit, because it's going to go up this year, will continue to grow in the coming years. And what the Professor Mehrotra has said that, look, timing is important, but I had hoped that, look, the poor is being taken care of by the government. The agriculture is being taken care of. The rural income is going up. The demand in rural markets is growing. But the 300 million that matter, I'm not talking about the upper income group. You're doing nothing. I was hoping that this time there would have been a little bit of balancing out there. And then that's when the oil in the engine comes in. They seem to think that the supply side will trickle down and then the demand will come. But India is one country, we always take the right decision right at the end after doing all the wrong ones. So we will always, move along and at the end of it, we'll come to the right decision. There has to be a balance now. Nobody is going to borrow. Nobody is going to take on people other than the government on infrastructure where they will create employment. But this is all medium and long term. If there are certain low-hanging fruits which is required, every time I go into all the markets selling, my FMCG products and everyone is saying, what about us? And the government is doing nothing there because their cost of living is going up and something has to be done for them. Otherwise, what they are planning to do is our saving rate will go up because they are saying for a rainy day, let's save money, let's not spend. And therefore, that's not the situation that we want either to happen.
Okay. Yes. Professor Aman Agarwal wanted to make a point.
Yes, I have been listening to everybody very patiently, very interestingly, very convincing arguments by everyone, I would say.
Yeah.
But let's understand a few things also here, that the government is trying to put in money in people's hand through giving them easy credit. When we look at housing itself, as far as various heads of the SBI and other banks which I've spoken to in the last few days, there is the amount of loans they're giving out has gone up extensively. The portfolios have gone up extensively. If people are not buying houses, then why are they taking those loans? Now, those are not only there. There's the moratorium which is being given, and the government is pressuring even the banks, where the banks are feeling they're going to be throttled because of the moratorium reliefs which are being given. Is going to be a cost. So the government is trying to take those fiscal hits. It's not that there are no fiscal hits being taken. There are going to be fiscal hits which are going to be taken. I think it's a question of balancing out how much are we ready to take that fiscal hit and to what level. The government is trying to empower different sectors, trying to put in frameworks in place so that we can have more balanced and better economic frameworks. Certainly, as my colleague from the industry and others said, that people may not get hired immediately. But I know I met an HR consultant yesterday, I met someone else day before. They are saying they are hiring for a large number of companies. I know industrialists who are hiring people and they are not able to get people up. Now, the government is trying to create these frameworks where they're going to at least ease up that even 12% what they're supposed to give is a small relief to the industry, but for an MSME, that's a big relief. For a large industry, it may not be such a big problem. But for a small industry, an MSME, a micro organization which works with 5, 10, 15 people, even that kind of a relief is a big relief today because they do not have the funds. When they talked of income tax rebates, I know we had no flows of students' fees coming in, but we had a wrongful deducted income tax relief which got actually committed to us. And as a result, we were able to finance small monthly payments of certain employees immediately. Now, these are small things, but they, at the end of the day, they make a lot of difference. And when they talk of farmers, fertilizer subsidies, others, fine, it may be a reallocation from one zone to the other, but at least it is going to people. If it is going to the people at the end of the day, it is going to make their lives better. Even if these discounts are taking place, why do we think India is a country of festivals? When do we not have festivals in this country? Is there a particular zone when we don't have festivals at all? So these discounts throughout, you go to a shop, you go to a mall, 365 days, you see a discount which is going on. People understand that, but they're ready to spend. The LTC relief which they're giving, we have seen in the past in economic frameworks in the last 60s, 70s, and 80s, whenever government employees were given certain grants, when their pay scales were revised, we saw immediate spending which used to take place. The economy used to boost up. Now, these are some small steps, and these are majorly going to be taken up by the middle class. That 300 million which Dr. Alag was talking about is going to take up those steps, and they're going to do. What I am saying here only is that the government is trying to regularize, put things in frame, and not only just, it's trying to empower people and industries, and especially the MSMEs in specific.
Mr. Sunil Alag?
Yeah, can I just say to him, because Professor Agarwal, I can give you a lot of examples, like you are giving examples of some companies, many companies are not hiring. So therefore, let's not get into the ones you are talking. I'm making a general statement. Look, ultimately, at the end of the day, those who are taking loans know they have to pay it back. So they're very reluctant to take the loans today because there's no demand for their products. They are taking loans to keep themselves alive. And look, ultimately, they'll have to pay it back. So unless the demand goes up, you're just procrastinating your problem into 2 years. They'll come back and say, look, I can't pay it back. Please give me relief. And you'll be stuck then. So therefore, all I'm saying is that, look, the government is doing a great job. I am not at all against the government in terms of attracting FDI, building exports, building pharma industries and all who are going to do it. And there are some industries who are going to hire. But if you talk to, generally speaking, they are being compelled to take loans. And therefore, there's a big difference between compelled and wanting to take loans for growth. And therefore, I'm making a very general statement, sir. And therefore, you got to keep that in mind. All I'm saying is there's a balance which is required between supply side and demand side. And demand side has been ignored right for the last 1 year completely, except the poor and the agriculture, which is very important. Having taken it towards them first, now is the time when the lot expected. And if you're saying that we're a country of festivals, yes. But whenever we make budgets in all FMCG companies, it is October, November, December that carries the maximum weight. No festival equals the festive mood of Diwali and Christmas and everything else. So please don't say we are a country of all festivities and therefore every month something will go up. It doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. Holi doesn't bring about the same growth. None of them will bring about the same
In fact,
growth.
if I may just
Therefore,
add to that,
please
Mr.
understand.
Alag, if I may, and you are completely right, and I think everybody agrees on the fact that this is considered in tough times like a make or break period.
Yeah.
You know, the kind of response that you see in demand, you see in sales, you see for a lot of consumer companies is extremely important in these 2-3 months. And the ones that I have spoken to, those who've even registered an increase in sales this time versus 6 months ago or even a year ago, they too are extremely cautious. They too don't know if this will sustain after the first 1 month or the 2 months, if it's simply the pent-up demand, because nobody did any shopping or any kind of spending for 6 months to 7 months. And now people do want to spend a little bit of money if they can afford to, and they're doing that. So even the companies themselves don't know what to make of the shopping that we're seeing right now, whether it's for clothes or FMCG products or even for a two-wheeler or a four-wheeler. The auto companies are not sure either. But if there is some amount of demand visible right now and the government is going ahead in facilitating more credit to the business houses, Mr. Tamal Madnopadhyay, to you and then Professor Mehrotra, wouldn't that help? Won't it help if companies can borrow to pay off their own employees, to expand their businesses, that at the end of the day, somebody gets that money in their hands?
The companies are not borrowing. If you look at the credit number, I don't want to burden your audience with data, but you just look at the credit number, credit is not picking up. And whatever credit has been done is under this compulsion, because government wants the bankers to give it to MSMEs and SMEs and all, which has been government guaranteed. And today you have got an extension of that particular package, which was up to 50 crore worth of turnover. Now it has gone up to 500 crore companies turnover, and also included those which a Kamath committee recommended those sectors. So these are all government guaranteed. 4 year, it was a 4-year loan with a 1 year moratorium. Now it has gone to 5-year loan with 1 year moratorium that has been extended. So we will see some money has been given under that particular scheme again. But otherwise, there has been debate all across. Bankers, are they risk averse or are they prudent? And bankers are saying, no, corporate India is risk averse. They are not investing at all. So this is the kind of situation. I just want to have two aspects of it. One is this: whatever has been done through these three-phase packages and all, there are many interesting things. There are many constructive things, but they are all related to reforms. The result of that, it's a good time. You don't want to waste a crisis, as they say. You want to push for reforms using this. It's a wonderful opportunity for that from that angle. But we will see the results later. We don't want to see the economy propping up overnight because of that. And large part of it is in the form of subsidy and dole. It is not an election year for the center. I would have thought that is because of the election government is doing. Government is not doing for elections. This is a strategy the government has adopted. And the third point, what I made is this: if you see, it's actually neutralizing what the government has not spent, what are the budgetary capex thing has not been spent. So that has been neutralized, or that has been compensated by this additional thing. So overall package, you will find that there's not much of spending happening. Having said that, finally, I mean, whether it will last or not, had the discussion happened 1 month back, would have been a different story. But over the past few months or first few weeks, if you see the various kind of data, whether it's exports, whether it's banks collection of loans, whether people going for a moratorium, I mean, people are going for restructure, asking for restructure or not, they're all positive vibes. So probably, I mean, we can discuss that, what kind of, what is the shape. You look at alphabet and all the kind of letters people are talking about, U, V, W, so on and so forth. Largely now is the K is the word people are talking about, K-shaped recovery, which means every sector will not recover at the same time, but recovery has started. So I think, we need to, this discussion, this debate, whether it is festivity related, the prop-up thing is done by the demand is because of festivals, or it will continue. We will get to know that later. But probably the worst is behind us. Probably we have started seeing things are picking up, we just need to wait. another part is this: if you see, probably we have already entered into recession, which Reserve Bank of India paper yesterday says, because it's a technical aspect, 2 quarters minus, but 2 quarters declined. But we will have a single-digit decline in growth. I think not 10 or 11 or 12%, probably 8.5%, probably less than what Reserve Bank of India had estimated. That's the kind of impression. So the worst is behind us. Could we have done a little differently? Would have been faster. I think government has become government is conservative, and there's always a threat of the rating downgrade. So they do not want to take any chance, and which is why we are seeing also the kind of foreign exchange flow it's happening. It's a problem with RBI. There is so much of liquidity. They are sterilizing, so on and so forth. So things are not. I'm not pessimistic at all. Whatever the ground government is leaving, RBI is covering it. RBI is pretty aggressive. So it's a combination of. We have to see it in totality, the government and the central bank. And if you see that in totality, I don't think we have much to complain. I think things are getting better. I think worst is behind us. To what extent, that we need to see only in the last quarter. But I am fairly certain that the worst is behind us. And we need to see the central bank's actions and the government.
Since you have drawn an optimistic picture for us, and I'm always glad to hear, a view that does sound more hopeful and optimistic, let me go across to Professor Mehrotra and bring the other side as well. Professor Mehrotra?
Well, I wish I could agree with Tamal. I wish. But we all know that people who are borrowing today are borrowing out of compulsion. And because the economy has been spiraling downwards, and we may not reach even 1920 levels of GDP in FY22. Perhaps we might get there in 23. You know what the implication is? So much capacity will be destroyed that both medium and large companies will go into NPAs, and the NPAs of the bank will rise. And if the government goes on pushing loans on non-viable companies, and MSMEs are going under in any case all the time, every knowledgeable person knows that our current level of NPAs, which were trending downwards from about 11% of advances to about 8.5–9% before COVID, are going to end up in 2 to 3 years' time at 14 to 15% of advances. Can you imagine what that means for the banking system, which is already extremely frail? It is going to challenge the public sector banking system very severely. So let us not be so sanguine about the government's effort to go on attempting to dynamize the economy, stimulate the economy through more lending. People are borrowing only out of compulsion, and firms will keep going down. They will not be able to repay. And all prognostications are that the NPAs will go up to 14 and 15%, and this is I speak on the basis of insider assessments within government itself. So let's not be so sanguine.
No, but if I may just come in here, Professor Mehrotra, because Tamal is also saying that people aren't really borrowing as much, irrespective of what the government may claim. The credit offtake isn't there.
But I didn't say they're borrowing that much. I didn't say that. I'm saying who is borrowing, like many others said. They're borrowing out of compulsion, point one. The second thing I said was that MSMEs are going under and large firms are also bleeding. They're doing badly. If they were not bleeding, why is it that we lost 22 million regular sector jobs? The organized sector is losing jobs.
Right.
Let us not kid ourselves. The fact of the matter is that if companies are shedding workers, they're shedding workers in order to reduce costs, because they can't bear their already high borrowing costs. So you may bring the real rates of interest down as the government has done to below zero, but the fact of the matter is that whatever is having to be paid is too hard for them under the current demand conditions.
Okay.
That's why a fiscal stimulus is so important.
Quick response from Mr. Unikrishnan on this.
First and foremost, I totally agree with Mr. Bandyopadhyay what he mentioned about, because there is an absolute positivity started prevailing in the market. Of the 37% of Indian companies who cut salaries of people, almost more than half of them are reinstated, most of that including the company where I worked earlier. I'm giving a ground level information. Orders getting concluded for capital goods, which is an indicator of the investment going to happen in the future, in the last 2 months have been very positive. I'm privy to the information that at least 7 or 8 sectors have already spoken about orders almost coming closer as they're expecting it. In the last quarter, the order intake is going to be almost equivalent to last year's Q4. Is the expectation. So I am not unduly worried about, and I'm totally, I join him in terms of the optimism. And India will, whatever is lost out. Just remember, Tanvi, the earlier discussion you had with the doctors, India has forgotten that the vaccine is not ready. And still we are telling people should consume. Why we didn't consume? Because all of us are closeted at home. Why would you want to buy clothes? Why would you, anything other than food? Basic necessities none of us did buy. Even if money was available, shops were not open. You didn't have the guts to go out. So we having a vaccine and ensuring that positivism prevail in the minds of the people. The banks are plumb with money. Reserve Bank of India has got 8 lakh crores of rupees from the banks because there is no taker for the money.
Correct.
And for that, they are getting only say 3.7 or 4%. There is no taker for the money. There is no credit difficulty at all in the country. Please remember that that's a situation. So demand picking up, even if there's an inflation, which Alec mentioned about, don't worry. Inflation is affordable at this point of time. We need to, I fully agree with all of them. We need to have the demand going to be happening tomorrow. For that, I mean, you don't have to be giving money in the hand. Even if you give money, nobody will buy anything right now. So
but
demand will
Mr.
pick up.
Unikrishnan,
fundamentally.
Okay, I agree with you to a certain extent, but to say that there is a lot of money because nobody needs this credit it may be a little misleading. Those who do need it, those who are in dire circumstances are shutting down. The banks are not willing to lend them. And the banks do have the money, the schemes are being announced. The others don't want to expand, are not borrowing. So that's two different things. It's not to say that nobody needs the money. They're probably the ones who are not getting it from the banks, irrespective of the schemes being announced. One thing that I do want to say is exactly the reason that you said, because people have been in a lockdown, they've obviously not spent, which is why I didn't raise the point of increase in household savings. Obviously, people were not spending money and they didn't know where they were headed 6 months ago, which is why they didn't spend that money, and the savings numbers have gone up. That being said, one can only hope that the sentiment that we are seeing this festival season remains. And we continue with this positivity. We continue to see signs of revival. But there are many things that I too would caution about. First itself would be COVID. We've started taking COVID lightly because the numbers have gone down, because we've begun to unlock and come out, and because we are tired, frankly. But tomorrow, or day after, or 2 months later, if the COVID cases begin to spike across the country, that will impact our economy and our businesses. And I'm not saying because we will go into a lockdown. Irrespective of whether or not we are in a lockdown, it will impact our businesses, it will impact our sentiment, it will further dent our spending. You and I, the common man, will not spend as much. So that is one word of caution. The other being that whatever people did not spend in the last 8 months and are doing now may not last too long, unless and until the companies start not just restoring their salaries, but also giving them more money, hiring more people, giving them the confidence that yes, they will have a job, they will have a good job, they will get some appraisal next year. Unless and until that happens, people are not going to spend beyond a certain amount. And that is where then the next set of problems will emerge. Yes, we are feeling good and optimistic today, but that's because after the darkness and the disaster that we saw a few months earlier, anything will look good to us. Don't forget, even if we go back to the pre-lockdown levels, we were still looking at an economy that was barely growing at 3 to 4%. That by itself was alarming. Just because we went to a point where the economy contracted 24%, things are looking better now. The government needs to constantly come out with more measures. Hopefully, the measures won't just be limited to credit guarantee schemes, but will actually go beyond that to boost spending and to boost investment. Thank you so much for joining us on this conversation.